That's what's making news in America this morning.
It's Friday, September 2nd. Donald Trump's not running for anything yet, but that didn't stop President Biden from making him the star of the show. We start here. In a primetime speech, the current president tells Americans the nation's biggest danger is the former president.
One side believes there are only two outcomes to an election. Either they win or they were cheated.
What it says about the state of the midterms and how Republicans are reacting. It took decades to raise math and reading levels, but all that progress might have just been wiped away.
We lost a critical window of teaching for a generation of kids.
We'll walk through some disturbing new test scores. And Nancy Pelosi left Taiwan a month ago, but the consequences are still just beginning.
Are you worried at all about China attacking Taiwan?
No, I'm a soldier.
Our team has traveled around the entire island to ask what happens if China attacks. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. A few weeks ago, our partners at 538 put out this model based on polling, historical precedents, all these factors, and said in the midterm elections in November, Republicans had almost a 90% chance of winning back the House, meaning Democrats had just a 1 in 10 chance of holding on. As of this week, the momentum has completely shifted. In the updated forecast, Republicans are still favored, but Democratic hopes have gone from 1 in 10 to 1 in 4. And last night, in a primetime appearance, President Biden made a campaign speech in the battleground state of Pennsylvania.
This is where America made its declaration of independence to the world more than 2 centuries ago.
He was not announcing a big COVID initiative or a plan to combat inflation. Instead, Biden portrayed this as something more fundamental, against the backdrop of former President Trump, of January 6th, and now of an investigation alleging that Trump kept troves of classified documents sitting around his house. Biden said this was a crossroads for America.
One side believes there are only two outcomes to an election. Either they win or they were cheated. And that's where the MAGA Republicans are today.
The White House claimed this was not a partisan political speech, but make no mistake, this was all about amping up the stakes of the midterm election in a moment where even Republicans say the race is shifting significantly.
We need everyone to do their part. So speak up, speak out, get engaged, vote, vote, vote.
So let's figure out what's happening in the midterms right now. Sarah Isgur is a GOP strategist, a campaign veteran. She formerly worked at the DOJ. She is now an ABC News contributor. And Sarah, first off, Biden often seems to say he doesn't want his politics to be just about Donald Trump, right? That his presidency should be about helping regular Americans, not adding to this fervor. Well, then we get this speech. I guess I'm wondering, how much do these midterms now revolve around Donald Trump?
I mean, in some ways, Joe Biden tried doing it his way for a year and a half, and his approval ratings kept going down and down and down. And an important detail to remember in that is it's not that his approval ratings were going down with Republicans. The reason that his approval ratings kept going down was from Democrats.
I don't think I'd vote for him again. I think he made a lot of promises concerning DACA.
When the shift in coverage, in topic, in focus moves to Donald Trump, Democrats started coming back to Joe Biden. We would have seen that anyway. This is what happens in the fall. Sort of people flirt over the summer with disliking their own team, and in the fall, they all come back to their partisan homes. Very common. So here, Joe Biden is absolutely benefiting from all of the focus on Donald Trump, on Mar-a-Lago, on Republican candidates disputing the 2020 election.
Right.
But it's help among Democrats. And I think that's important to remember.
And that's what I was going to ask, because and you have a perspective both from your work at the DOJ and also in Republican politics. We keep hearing this drip, drip, drip out of the Mar-a-Lago search, but is that something that matters to voters? Where does that figure into the politics of all this?
Yeah, I mean, not in the way you necessarily think. Again, I think it's those atmospherics, what the youngins would call the vibe shift.
The vibes have shifted.
It's not the specifics of what was tweeted in that photo. And oh my gosh, did you see the yellow border on that top secret folder? That's not what's moving voters. But it is sort of the atmospheric reminder of Donald Trump looming in this election. And the other thing that it may change, and this will have more of an effect than maybe anything other than gas prices that we're talking about, Donald Trump was almost certainly going to announce for president at some point in the next 6 weeks. That appeared to be his plan, according to his advisors. It was sort of accepted as fact that he would announce before the midterms, while, of course, every Republican was like, please, no, dear God, no.
Right.
It's looking like he may actually not announce before the midterms. That will have a huge effect, I think, because, again, it at least leaves open the possibility that our vibe, if you will, shifts back to being a focus on Joe Biden and a referendum on his administration if Mitch McConnell can get his way. And right now, of course, Republicans are all disarrayed, throwing rocks at each other and hating on Mitch McConnell.
Well, and let's talk about candidate quality then, Mitch McConnell's favorite phrase, because about as far away as you can get from Pennsylvania, Alaska. We saw Sarah Palin lose a race for Congress earlier this week in Alaska. Normally, it's a seat you might expect to go to a Republican, but this wasn't a one-on-one race. Instead, it was ranked choice voting for the first time there. The Democrat wasn't necessarily the first choice, but she was enough people's second or third choice that she won. Does that mean anything else, though, for the other 434 seats in the House?
No. But yes. So first of all, Alaska is a weird state. We think of it as a deep red state because of how it votes in the presidential. But like Kentucky, Louisiana, Kansas, these are states that are actually much weirder than we give them credit for at the presidential level when you get down to state and local races. Alaska may be the weirdest of all of them. Add in ranked choice voting, which is now, you have someone like Senator Tom Cotton saying ranked choice voting is a scam, for instance. This was not ranked choice voting's fault that a Democrat got elected if you're a Republican looking at it. We've had experiments with ranked choice voting. We have academic studies which show that it actually doesn't make the huge difference that you think it's going to make.
We have just begun, and it's a fight for what is right for Alaska and for our nation.
Here we have a notoriously weak, polarizing candidate. In the first choice votes, she didn't come in first. The Democrat came in first. And so then when you took out the other Republican running and asked people who their second choice was, those Republican voters got to pick. They picked the Democrat.
Well, just a tremendous sense of gratitude and appreciation for the people who've put trust in me to fill out the remainder of Congressman Young's term.
I think looking at Alaska and saying, aha, Democrats are having a stronger year than you think. No, Sarah Palin's having a weaker candidacy than you thought.
And always a strong performance from Sarah Isgur. Thank you so much for the analysis.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Next up on Start Here, the children are our future, but could 2 years of their past define a generation? An educational bombshell lands with a thud after the break.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
Now streaming on ABC News Live.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
If you talk to any parent, they'll tell you the last 2 years have been a grueling challenge, particularly for kids in school. Many say their kids aren't as motivated, that it's just harder to get a high-quality education through a Zoom screen, and that even in person, teacher shortages have created this obvious drop-off in learning.
This year, I just felt like he's missed out on so much social and emotional development.
But how do you quantify that? How do you prove that's happening? How do you know if your kid is learning less or if it just feels like they're learning less? Well, yesterday, the National Center for Education Statistics, probably the nation's most consistent and respected report card, revealed test results from the beginning of the pandemic to now, and it shows scores plummeting. Let's go to ABC's Eli Cahan, who's been covering this. He's actually trained in pediatrics. Eli, what was this test and how bad are the results?
Hey, Brad, thanks for having me on. So this is a test that's administered to elementary schoolers age 9, and it's administered during sort of intermittent school years every now and again between January and March. So they gave one in 2020, and they gave another administration of this test in 2022. They found in the 2022 results that reading scores plunged their lowest levels since the 1990s. And that math scores dropped for the first time in the test history. And the test goes back as far as the 1970s. I think it's going to come as no surprise to you that the differences in the scores were not evenly distributed. Like so much during the pandemic, the losses that society has suffered have not been equal. And similarly in the scores, the kids who are already struggling saw the steepest drops.
I feel like the online was only targeted towards one type of student that can sit there and just listen to someone talk for hours at a time. But for me, I'm not that type of student.
One of the other differences we saw was between race and ethnic groups. Black and Hispanic students fell behind at even more severe rates than white students did.
Well, and so is there a sense, so I get that they're kind of not evenly distributed, but we're seeing these drops. Are there reasons that we suspect for the drops? Is it just that Zoom school sucks, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think that virtual school is a struggle for everybody, Brad. The Government Accountability Office did a study in June of 2022, and they found that, kiddos who were in exclusive virtual school as well as hybrid school were really seeing less progress over the school year than those who were full in person. So I think the phenomenon of virtual school is definitely an important piece of this. For any of us thinking back to our experience in school, it's going to come as no surprise that, school is a lot more than just sitting in a classroom. It's also all those side conversations that we have in the classroom. It's that kind of filler time in between classes. It's the extracurriculars. And it's hard to quantify all of those. But we do know, for example, that one-on-one teacher-student tutoring is a really important tool for education. We also know that peer-to-peer learning, whether that takes place in the classroom in the form of group work or kind of side conversations as the teacher's up there, yammering away, or in extracurricular peer-to-peer settings like study groups, we know that those are all really important tools for learning that stretch kind of beyond the traditional chalkboard and notepad style of teaching. One other thing that I think is really interesting about this data is that they asked students about resources that they did or didn't have at their fingertips, in addition to looking at test scores alone. And they found that a lot of the lower performing students didn't have access to a computer, laptop, or tablet. They didn't have access to high-speed internet, and they didn't even have access to quiet spaces, something that I think a lot of us take for granted.
Yesterday, I didn't enter our class, and neither did the teacher because she didn't have internet connection.
Learning and effective learning is about so much more than just IQ alone or academic competency. There's a lot of context here that may be affecting those who are in the lower performing groups that we should keep in mind.
Yeah, and depending on who you ask, this is going to affect kids for years and years after this, just because the learning deficiencies compound over time. Other experts say it can be rectified if you give kids more resources, but that's where these teacher shortages come in, right? Who's going to tutor all these students? Eli Cahan, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Brad.
America's determination to preserve democracy here in Taiwan and around the world remains ironclad.
When House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suddenly popped up in Taiwan earlier this summer, it created an international stir. It was celebrated by Taiwanese who had been pleading with the U.S. to side with them in their quest for self-determination. It prompted fury in China, where Beijing angrily denounced what they saw as a slap in the face. Remember, they consider Taiwan theirs.
If the U.S. side is bent on having its own way, China will take resolute and forceful measures.
And it put the White House and State Department in a bind. They've tried to keep this awkward status quo for years.
The military thinks it's not a good idea right now.
The United States is not looking for escalation.
Speaker Pelosi makes her own decisions.
Well, then, after days in the spotlight, Nancy Pelosi left. For many Americans, that's where the story stops. But for many Taiwanese, Pelosi's visit tipped several dominoes that are only beginning to fall now.
Taiwan has responded in kind, with troops firing warning shots for the first time on a Chinese drone intruding on an outer island this week.
Increasingly, residents on this island are having to ask themselves, what would I actually do? What would my family actually do if China decided to invade? ABC's Bob Woodruff was based in Beijing for years, and for the last several weeks, he's actually been making his way around the island of Taiwan. Bob, thanks for being with us. Most Americans, I'm sure, kind of tuned out after Nancy Pelosi went home. What has the effect been there in Taiwan?
The people that we met walking the streets said a couple of things. One is that they've never seen China so active out at sea and around their country and their lives.
We want stability. We are a small island in the world.
She seems to really anger China. Are you worried about that at all?
Some of them will tell you, listen, if we're attacked, I will take out a gun and fight myself.
I can use a weapon. You were a soldier?
Yeah.
You were a soldier?
Yeah. Yes.
However, there are a lot of people on the street that say, listen, Taiwan is an advanced economic country too. And China needs Taiwan, and Taiwan needs China in terms of the economy.
Well, he doesn't think a war will break out. He hopes that both governments, people across the strait, can have mutual respect to each other.
So I would say that the people here are constantly concerned about what China is doing, and they realize that because an American high-level Nancy Pelosi came to visit, that China is angry and is acting more, but they also believe that this was already going to happen, that China was going to do something to step up its training.
Could you see a difference in the country after the Pelosi visit? Like, was it that sudden?
It was literally within hours after Nancy Pelosi left the country. China not only sent out more ships, more planes flew all around the edges of the country. They launched 11 ballistic missiles. 4 of them went over the top of Taiwan, the first time ever. And all of these apparently were weaponized too.
Taiwan's military shooting down an unidentified civilian drone that entered its airspace near the Chinese coast on Thursday.
There's been drones now that have flown over the top, spying, ultimately probably could drop things as well. So China's going to use every device that they've got to try to make sure to send this message to Taiwan. And of course, every message that they're sending to Taiwan is really sending to the United States. We took a C-130 that headed down from the capital down to one of the bases, the Hualien Air Force Base.
So at the base, this is where they're now training to how to use the howitzers, the ones that they can fire from here at the base itself.
We had the chance to talk to the Defense Ministry spokesperson who was down there, Sun Lifang. Are you worried at all about China attacking Taiwan?
No, I'm a soldier. To protect our nation is my responsibility.
And he said very clearly, listen, we're training. We're going to win if we need to fight. We don't really have a fear of China.
We want to demonstrating we will never give up.
We also spoke to one of the pilots there, Captain Chong Guoliang, and he too said, listen, we are training more than we ever have before.
I would say definitely the alert jets have been sending out more frequently, but everybody's ready for it.
That's the siren you would hear if there's a missile approaching, going over the top of Taiwan.
And it's just pretty stunning that China had fired missiles in this direction around the country before, like in 1996, for example. But this is the first time ever that a weaponized missile was fired over the top of this country. Taiwanese have had difficulty having a real identity, because of the history of this island, this series of islands off the coast of China.
Taiwan has been a pawn on the chessboard, right? And then, superpowers, they struggle over this pawn.
We had the chance to talk to one of the top Taiwanese historians, Ray Renwu.
When, during the 400 years, when all the superpowers kept fighting each other to control Taiwan, there was a Taiwanese society emerging.
Storm signals over the Formosa Straits draw attention anew to the Chinese nationalist island stronghold, a perennial crisis point on the frontier between the free and the communist worlds.
It was never officially called an independent country for Taiwan. Those who were in power in the world, which was largely driven by the United States and the UN, did not ultimately say this is an independent Taiwan.
As the president has stated, we are not going to use our forces in connection with the present situation in Formosa.
It kept very vague, very unclear exactly what this country was, what this place was. And that's been a problem ever since. So China is now growing in power. You got Xi Jinping, the new leader within the mainland of China, and he clearly wants to get this land back. He's never officially said it, but he certainly flexed his muscles so many times that he would like to do that. So what's the rest of the world going to do to try to keep this from happening?
Can China claim that this is part of their country and no independence could ever happen?
China was under multiple imperial powers, right? And after that, Taiwan and China had been separated. And the current People's Republic of China has never ruled Taiwan for even a single second. So no, I don't think they have any claim over Taiwan's sovereignty.
Well, and so I guess I'm wondering, what is the average Taiwanese resident expecting? Like, do they expect that they're going to have to confront China sometime in the near future?
Well, I think a couple things are happening. One is China's strength keeps accelerating, getting stronger. China's going around the world with growing influence and investments. At the same time, Taiwan, which has always relied on allies like the United States and other countries around Asia to back them if there's ever an attack from China. But that, of course, has been weakening, largely because the U.S. was so tied up with, of course, Europe after World War II, 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan. So the people here are concerned that they're getting less support from the outside than they really need because largely the United States is now distracted and Europe again. China does not want to hear the word independence. But now the younger generation really feel that they are Taiwanese and they want to be Taiwanese.
Is China getting more frightening to you now?
Chinese?
China, yeah.
Yep. Everybody can see that, especially in this exercise.
One activist who's Chili Chen, who runs this anti-China organization called Taiwan Republic, and he said they will never give up.
I will fight till I die. Okay, I think everybody would do the same.
We are fighting for our freedom, he says. We are working on our democracy.
Well, and it's fascinating that a country that clearly sees itself as self-governing, as independent, essentially, deep down it sounds like their residents know they can't go it alone. They're not fully independent. Like, if they can't rely on the U.S., that means they're going to become more reliant on China. That's just a fact, which is why Pelosi's trip really seems to be so important in the weeks and even years to come. Bob Woodruff, they're in Taipei. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
And one last thing. Planning on taking a swim this weekend? Well, just make sure the tax man isn't watching. Earlier this week, the National Tax Authority in France revealed they had discovered thousands and thousands of backyard swimming pools that had been installed without being properly declared. Since a pool can affect your property value, pool owners in France are expected to pay on average about 200 extra euros per year in property tax. But the news here was how they discovered these pools.
Zut alors, I have missed one.
They did it using an artificial intelligence system that quickly analyzes satellite imagery. Just by looking at 9 regions, the French collected 10 million euros in new taxes, so now they say they might be rolling out this program nationwide. A few years ago, even if they had had this technology, they would not have netted nearly as much. Just like in the US, France experienced a pool boom during pandemic lockdowns. And this could go beyond pools now. The French tax office says this could eventually be used to spot home extensions not on public record, or a fancy new gazebo. Yes, gazebo owners are expected to pay more too. But can the eye in the sky always be trusted? From up above, a kid's playhouse could look like a pool house. A sandbox could be mistaken for a beige patio, which is why across France, there are lots of homeowners hoping this takes a while to implement while they invest in some grass-colored pool covers. All looks the same from up there. You know, what should be concerning French people is they're in the middle of a drought. One of their big politicians focused on green energy recently seemed to be considering a potential ban on pools. He said, that's the last resort. Hope you have a cool weekend wherever you are. We got a special episode on Monday as we continue our series of monthly deep dives this summer. You'll definitely want to listen to that. Start Here is produced by Kelly Therese, Jen Newman, Brenda Salinas Baker, Louis Millman, Madeline Wood, Vika Aronson, Iru Ekpanobi, Tara Gimbel, and our newest producer on the team, Cameron Chertavian. Ariel Chester is our social media producer. Josh Cohan is director of podcast programming. I'm our managing editor. Liz Alessi is the head of ABC Audio. Thanks to Lakia Brown, John Newman, and our intern, Ania McLean. Special thanks this week to Chris Berry, Aaron Ferrer, Catherine Falders, Alex Mallon, Brendan Rand, and Gina Sinceri. I'm Brad Milkey. See you next week.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms. Take America's #1 news with you, anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7, there for you with one touch. The ABC